Hello everyone and welcome to today's webinar. Thank you for attending. Today's topic is resource management, the Holy Grail. We have a lot of things to cover today, so let's go ahead and get started. Let me introduce myself for a moment. My name is Terry Nieberg. I am the Director of Services at Sensei Project Solutions. In addition to being a project management professional, I also have several Microsoft certifications in using the tools related to Microsoft PPM, like Project Online, Project Server, and SharePoint. I've also had the privilege of working with some of my colleagues on authoring several books. We have the Ultimate Application Administrator's Guide for Project Online, which was a labor of love that we released about a year ago. And we've also produced another book called Proactive PPM with Microsoft Project 2016. I definitely encourage you to check those out. I'm actually based in the Atlanta, Georgia area in the United States. A little bit about Sensei Project Solutions. We were actually Microsoft's PPM Partner of the Year in 2014, which was something we were all very proud of as a team, and we were also a finalist in 2015. I'm privileged to work with a team that has very, very deep experience with this tool set. We've literally done hundreds of deployments and trained thousands of people in using this tool, and we do have a global impact with this tool. To give you some idea of our global impact, we actually have clients in 35 countries around the world, as you can kind of see from this map here. We have quite a presence throughout the world. In terms of where we are located throughout the United States and Canada, as well as in Australia. So quite a bit of coverage there. Now you may ask, why Sensei? What's so good about Sensei? I would say that Sensei is very, very dedicated to helping our clients be successful, and that comes into play through helping them achieve their strategic goals using productivity solutions like Microsoft Project and Project Online and so forth. We are very passionate about what we do, and ultimately we care about making you successful, because if you're not successful, then we're not successful. We offer a lot of capabilities to our various clients. Those fall into 4 primary categories: services, solutions, training, and apps. On the services side, we do offer traditional PPM consulting as well as ongoing support and customer care. We have a number of solutions which really add a lot of value to our clients and help you to get started and take advantage of the experience we have and the various deployments we've done throughout the years. We have a Jumpstart solution, which really is one of our flagship products that can help you have a very solid foundation and a best practice configuration up and running very quickly. And we have several other offerings as well in the solutions area. We're also very much about knowledge transfer and education, which is why we do webinars like we're doing today. And we have a number of role-based training offerings that fall into categories of classroom training, some virtual training, and also e-learning and best practices books. We are very much process focused, so the books are not really written, and the courses are not written from a perspective of every feature and function within the tool, but we guide you through the best practices and the key things you need to know to manage your work in the system. We also offer several apps that help add additional capability to the system, and those might be something you'd be interested in as well. So we're here today to talk about resource management, and honestly speaking, this is probably one of the most critical areas that we come across with our clients. Almost everyone we work with has challenges in the area of resource management. I have lots of resources working on lots of things. I know a lot of people are very busy. Perhaps they have more on their plate than they can do. And so these are the kind of questions that we typically get asked when we're working with our clients. First is, what is this resource engagement stuff I've heard about? It seems to be a new feature in Microsoft Project Online. How does that work? Also, can we support both the project manager needs and resource managers too? Can I manage capacity and demand in PPM? Will I be able to make high-level resource estimates before approving or scheduling individuals? And do generic or skill resources help me with long-range planning? So these are typically the kind of questions we get asked. Ultimately, what people are trying to determine is, what is the capacity of my organization to take on additional work, as well as what is the capacity and availability of the people that are already working on in-flight projects. So to implement resource management in Microsoft PPM, there are several things that we should be aware of. Obviously, there is some configuration that needs to be done to make the resource management work effectively. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means. Part of that is just configuring the resource metadata so that we classify our resources and allows us then to see what our capacity versus demand is for different types of resources, by department or by role or by team or something like that. Also, we can do high-level resource estimates in the early stages of a project proposal. And what we recommend is that you use generic resources, which are not real people, they're just placeholders. But those generic resources allow us to capture the high-level demand for certain types of resources that we're going to need for these new project proposals that have kind of come into the intake funnel. Now, also resource engagements is one of the newer features in Project Online. And this was rolled out, I think, about a year ago. And what Microsoft has done is given us the ability to have an interactive discussion between project managers and resource managers in the Microsoft PPM system. So it allows project managers to request resources to work on their projects, and then it allows resource managers to review those requests and then allocate the proper resources to fulfill the requests. Now finally, reporting is also a very big part of this resource management implementation. Obviously, we want to be able to have visibility into what's going on in the organization as it relates to resources so that we can see, do we have any bottlenecks in the system? Do we have particular areas where we might need to think about adding resources? Do we have resources that have availability for other work and things like that? So the reporting will definitely help us with those kind of questions. So let's talk about configuring the resource pool. So I have a resource in my organization that's very, very eager to take on new work, and he's known as Johnny Eager. So in order to be more effective at managing my resources, I would like to classify them. And these are several ways that we can classify resources that we recommend. You may have additional ones as well. But fundamentally, I would like to understand what this resource's primary role is. Is this resource, for example, a database administrator, or they a business analyst, a developer, a project manager, those kind of things. Another way I might classify my resources is by skills. So does this resource know SQL, DB2, Oracle.net, things like that. Also, my organization is probably made up primarily, if you think about the overall organizational structure, down at the lowest level, there are typically teams of people that have a manager that oversees the team. And for example, we might have a database team, we might have a quality team, we might have an application development team. So that's also another way that we can classify our resources by what team they're part of. At a little bit higher level, we also may have our organization broken down into departments, especially for a larger organization. So we might have an IT department, a finance department, a QA department, and things like that. And then there may be additional expertise or applications that we can associate with the resource. And all of this serves two purposes. First, we can then evaluate our resource capacity and demand by role or by team, by department. And it also allows our project managers to look for resources based on their skill set or their expertise and things like that. So the investment you make in configuring your resource pool up front will really pay dividends on the back end in helping you see what's going on with your resources. Now, from a planning perspective, we encourage organizations to use kind of what you might know as a rolling wave approach to resource planning. And what that means is that in the near term, say the next month or so, we have named individuals in project schedules that are assigned to tasks because that is work that has been planned out. Those resources know what they need to work on, and it's basically being executed right now. So we want to use the named individuals on task and project schedules in the near term. Now, for longer term planning, especially for projects that are coming into the intake funnel, we don't usually know enough detail at the beginning of a project proposal where we can really build a complete project schedule. So rather than doing that, we're going to use a resource plan using generic resources as placeholders, and we will just forecast the high-level demand that we need for those proposals, and then that will allow us to at least reserve some capacity in the system to show that we have these proposed projects that are going to utilize some part of our available resources, and we just need to account for that so that we have the total resource planning picture. Now, in terms of the resource engagements, this is where the project manager and the resource manager can interact in Microsoft PPM. And a project manager can request a resource, and a resource manager can then review and fulfill that request. So if we look at this process flow here, we see it starts with the project manager, and inside his project, he's going to create a resource plan that includes engagements. And he will define the types of resources that he or she needs. And then the resource engagements will be submitted for approval. And while the resource engagements are pending approval in the project plan, they will show as being proposed. So the project manager submits those engagement requests, and then the resource manager can then go into PWA. They can review those engagement requests and see what types of resources are being requested and the time frame for those requests. Then they can do some analysis to see what the current workloads look like for those types of resources. And then the resource manager has the ability to either approve the request, they can reject the request, or they can even modify the request and say, I understand you need this type of resource. I can provide you a resource that's close or maybe a similar time frame or something like that. So then after that point, the project manager is going to continue to monitor his or her projects to see if there's any overcommitments within their project schedules. And the resource managers have the ongoing responsibility for making sure that the resources on their team are not overcommitted. And they can monitor that. They have visibility into all of the projects that their resources are working on. Now, from a reporting perspective, I just wanted to show a couple of examples. I'll show a few more a little bit later in the webinar today. But first, this is an example of a resource availability report. And this resource availability report that I've built looks at resource availability from several different perspectives. Since I have defined my resources by role, by team, and by department, I can then analyze the resource availability by those same categories. So I can look at resource availability by role, by team, or by department. And using reports like this, I can very easily identify where I have bottlenecks or shortfalls. So I can have the report formatted so that wherever there's a resource over allocation, that can show up in red and point me to where the problem areas are so that I can investigate further and take more action into what changes might be necessary. Now here's another example of what we might do in the reporting area. I mentioned that we might use generic resources for planning on the early on stages of a project, and we can actually produce a report that shows where we still have generic resources allocated to projects, and that work is coming up in the near future. So this report can help me identify areas where I might need to start replacing those resources with named resources. So again, this is a pending assignments by role report, and just identifies those areas where we still have generic resources assigned, but the work is scheduled to start very soon. So just a couple of examples of what you might do in the reporting area. And again, you can get an appreciation here for there is some work go on with the configuration of the resource pool up front to make all this reporting possible. And of course, I suppose it goes without saying that you also need to make sure that you've captured all the in-flight project work as well as any proposed work that might be coming into the intake funnel. All right, so let's pop out of our slides here and let's actually go into the tool and let's take a look at what some of this looks like. So here I'm in PWA, and I'm actually in the Resource Center. I just wanted to start by showing you how I've configured my resource pool here. So in the Resource Center, I've actually classified my resources by department, by role, and by team. And so I can actually, by doing that, I can also create views that show me, my active resources by department, for example, or active resources by role. And looks like I've got a filter there. Let me remove that. So again, these are my active resources by role. So again, if I expand that, I can see that this is my team of business analysts here. So all of these individuals, Albert Connell, Curtis Buckley, and David DeLucci, their primary role is as a business analyst. Now, I'll also point out here that we also have configured a generic resource that has the same name as that role, and I can use this generic resource whenever I have a new project proposal where I'm going to need that type of resource, but I don't know exactly who's going to do the work. So I can use that placeholder generic resource at that time. And we also have active resources by team, and so if I'm managing the architecture team, for example, then I can easily see these are all the resources that are on my architecture team, and I can get started with that. Okay. So let's start with projects. Now that we have the resource pool configured, let's start with projects that are kind of in the proposal process right now, and let's get an idea for how we can capture the high-level demand for resources on these new project proposals. So I'm actually going to open my traffic signal synchronization system project here. This is a new proposed project, so let me open that in Microsoft Project. All right, and I'm going to change to a view here that we've created called Resource Plan. And what this allows me to do is say that I need certain types of resources on my project. And so you can see here, for example, that I have created what is called a resource engagement. So if I double click on my resource engagement here, I can see that I have said that I need a DBA, and I need the DBA from August 1st, 2016 to December 30th, 2016. And I've said that I basically need a full-time DBA here, 100%. And I can actually see the demand out here in the time phase grid, so I can see month by month what that demand is that I have asked for. And I can also see here that I can see the engagement status, and I see that this engagement status is proposed, which means that I have submitted it, but no one has gone in and actually approved that or assigned a real resource to it just yet. And so on this resource engagement ribbon here, you can add an engagement, and you can define which resource you need. Perhaps I need a network architect. And then you can define start and finish dates. And you can decide, okay, do I want to define this in percentage? In other words, what percentage do I need? Or do I literally want to define it in terms of the number of work hours? So this is the way that you can allocate or plan for high-level resources at the beginning. And we'll take a look at what that looks like in PWA in just a moment. But then once I've created the engagements, I can then submit the engagement, and my resource managers can then see those requests for engagements. Now, when you're configuring the project here and you want to use the information here from your resource plan, because this is early on, I don't have enough detail in my project schedule yet, so I want to use these proposed engagements here to estimate my resource demand. There is a setting here that I have to configure. So if I go to the project information screen here, right in the middle, and I'm using Microsoft Project 2016, there is a calculate resource utilization from. So by default, that is set to project plan. So I want to use my resource engagements here because I just have high-level resource plan information at this point in the process. So if I set that to calculate resource utilization from resource engagements, the system will then use the data in this resource plan view here to show that this is the demand for resources for this particular project proposal. That's how we can do high-level planning at the beginning of the process. Let me go ahead and close this project. Now on a project that is already in flight, let me show you one of those. I'll open my Tornado infrastructure here. Okay. I also had a resource plan initially for this project, but I can see here if I go to the resource plan that I can see that now I have named resources here, and you can see in the engagement status these have been committed. So that means that the resource manager has gone in, they have approved the request, we've put a named resource on it, and now I can feel free as a project manager to begin planning my detailed project schedule here and assigning those resources to actual tasks in my project schedule. And when you get around to actually using the real project schedule information, then you change this resource utilization calculation to say from project plan. And what I'm telling the system is that use the data from my project schedule to show the resource demand for this project. So that's what it looks like from a project manager perspective. Now from a resource manager perspective, they're doing all their work inside of PWA. So as a resource manager, let's say for example that I'm managing the architecture team, and I want to see if there are any resource requests here for my team. So I'm going to select Steve Router, who's on my team, to see if anyone has requested his services. I'm also going to request a network architect, which is the generic role that serves the same purpose as Steve Router. So once I've selected those two resources in Resource Center, up here in the ribbon I can select Resource Requests. And then I can see if there have been any requests for those two resources that I selected. And it seems like my demo environment is taking a lunch break here. So let's see. There we go. Okay, so I have to be a little patient. So what I see on the resource request page here is that I have, it looks like, two requests here for a network architect. And I can see that the state is proposed. So I haven't actually gone in and processed that one yet. Now for Steve Router, who's on my team, I've already approved several, and once I approve it, I can see the state changes to committed. So these are resource requests that I've already approved. So if I select one of these proposed ones here, I have the option to accept that or reject it, or I can even edit the engagement here. So if I wanted to edit this engagement request from, looks like that came from my colleague Raphael, if I wanted to say, instead of saying you can have a network architect, I want to assign Steve Router and say you can have Steve Router, then I can just do that and say OK. And then if I approve that, then the project manager would see that approval on their end in the project schedule. So again, this just allows the resource manager to be engaged with the project manager and have that interaction for requesting and approving resources. Now, another function the resource manager does is do capacity planning. So in the ribbon here, there's a capacity planning button. That allows me to look at the resources I've selected and see what does their workload look like for the time frame I've picked here. So I'm looking at basically November through March here, and I've selected two resources, a network architect and Steve Router, and I can see this is the total capacity, this kind of orange line here at the top for the resources I've selected, and I can see that right now it looks like I do have capacity for Steve Router here. He could take on additional project work up to this line right here in the time frame I've selected. So again, this is an ongoing function of the resource manager just to monitor that. Now I want to show you some reports that are available as well, and these are just examples that you might take advantage of. These are not out of the box. These are actually something that we at Sensei have developed, and I just want to show you a few examples to give you a flavor. So first off, this is a resource availability report, and this allows me to see where I have shortfall in the organization. I see, wow, I have a lot of red, so I have a lot more requested work than I have capacity here. And I can actually drill in here and see, okay, where is the problem exists? And it looks like Mike and Steve are just really, really overallocated this year. So I probably need to dig in and find out where are all this project work coming from and perhaps shift some work around. Another report here is looking at it from a bigger picture. Because I've captured all the work information in the system, including in-flight projects and new requests, I can look at trends here to see if I'm having any peaks in workload over time. And I can look at that from a department perspective. I can look at that from a role perspective, and so on. So again, all this is because I've configured my resource pool and I've captured all the demand for the resource work in the system. Also, I might be interested in seeing, do I have any work that's still allocated to generic resources that's coming up very soon that I need to go ahead and allocate to real people? So a report like pending assignments by role here would show me that, and I can actually drill in here and see, which projects are asking for these resources here and how many hours by month are needed. So obviously I need to get some real resources assigned since this work is taking place this month. Finally, the last report I will show you today, this is a resource engagements report. So just to help your resource managers get a handle on what resource engagements are being requested, this report will help me see the engagement demand for the various departments. And so I can actually drill in here and get more details about what's being requested of me and see how many hours are being requested per person. And again, just allow me to do a better job of managing the overall resource picture. Okay. So I hope this demo was helpful for you today. I do want to thank you for attending today's webinar. We would certainly be happy to help you with any of your resource management needs. So please feel free to reach out to us at Sensei Project Solutions. You can find us on the web at senseiprojectsolutions.com. And we certainly wish you all the best in your endeavors with Microsoft PPM. I hope you have a wonderful day.